Hi, I am Pratim Ranjan Bose, and you are watching Podcast with Pratim, presented by Iravati Research and Communication Center, or IRCC. I have with me retired Major General Dr. Rajan Kochhar, VSM. Mr. Kochhar is an expert on defense sector modernization. He is a PhD in management, he's an author and media commentator. He advises various defense research institutes and think tanks in India. In the previous episode with Major General Kochhar, we discussed about modernization of Indian Army and OFB factories. We also briefly discussed about the Make in India campaign in defense. The link of the previous episode is given in the details of this video. In this episode, we will focus on Make in India in defense. We will try to know why it is important for the armed forces. This is apart from replacing imports and reducing the need of foreign currency, and more critically, generating factory jobs in India. Sir, I spent over 3 decades in economic journalism. For all these years, defense was an off topic for me and majority of the journalists, because it was a closely guarded secret of government establishments. From there, we are suddenly into private sector defense manufacturing and defense sector specific mutual funds. Some of them are giving very good returns, very high returns. L&T, Adani, Tata, Mahindra, you name it, and India's top corporates are in defense. From tanks, small arms, components for missiles, drones, to launchers, they are everywhere. My first question is, how do you look at this cultural shift? How are the forces dealing with this change? Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Pratim. It's been a pleasure and it's been an honor for me to be invited to your podcast. A very interesting question because you raised this issue that defense was something which was not privy to public and people of the country at large. It was a hush hush affair. The reason was that defense by the previous governments thought that it was a strategic sector, and in a strategic sector, uh, it should be the monopoly of the government or the public sector, and private sector must be kept away. It was basically on the Russian model, how the Russian started doing the business initially. Russia changed, but India did not change because the thinking was still very conservative, very rigid. We never could imagine. I have been in the force for 37 years. In my 37 years, I saw the change happening only after around my 30th year of service. So you can imagine that 3 decades of mine was spent in an organization with our over dependence on our ordnance factories, on our defense PSUs, and hardly anything coming from the private sector. Now, what has happened because of this policy? It has impacted the modernization of the armed forces, and very, very adverse effect. And I'll just give you some figures I have. In the Indian Army, 64% of the equipment we are holding is a vintage. Vintage means that it has a legacy of almost 2 to 3 decades. 24% of the equipment we are holding is current, That is, we have procured this equipment in the last 5 years to 7 years, and 8% of the equipment is the state of art, means we have imported this equipment. It's of a very high technology and it's a state of the art equipment. So now,
That's a very
if you
staggering figure. That's a very
now
alarming figure.
if you want to have a modern army, please reverse these figures. 64% state of the art, 24% current, and 8% vintage. That should be your formula now. So now, if you want to focus on state of art, and state of art means you want to compete with your adversary who has the state of art with him. So now this cultural shift has to be accepted by the armed forces, and it's been accepted with open arms. Let me tell you, if you think that the Indian armed forces did not want it to happen, you will be sadly mistaken. We always wanted this to happen, but the bureaucracy did not allow it to happen, because all these defense PSUs, all the ordnance factories, they are the holy cows of the bureaucracy, because they are in the direct control of the bureaucracy, and therefore nobody wants to lose control in this country. The
Yes,
bureaucracy
this
wants to
is
control this.
this is actually very interesting. It is one thing to drive, we were all forced in those days, cars were beyond the reach of people like you and me. But anyway, we were forced to drive the Bajaj scooters in those days, Pia scooters and Bajaj Chetaks and Ambassador cars of those days. Very poor
Yes, I
technology,
remember.
Second World War technology. But that is one thing, deprived of my choices. But when you go out on the front with a faulty or a vintage rifle in your hands, and for you, it is a life and death question. For me, it is a lifestyle choice. For you, it is a life and death. So you shouldn't have that, you should always have that updated version on you. That's what I believe.
Very, very, very pertinent. I'll give you a very small example to highlight what you said just now. We had a problem in getting bulletproof jackets. So, during my time, I will tell you the period also. 2014 to 2017, we grappled with getting a bulletproof jacket which was as per the specifications of the Indian Army. It took us 3 years. Pratim, just imagine a thing like a bulletproof jacket for a soldier to be equipped. It took us almost 3 years to get this item. But
Very
now,
unfortunate.
what happens is, so very interesting here. You get the bulletproof jacket, uh, which can stop maybe an iron bullet uh, normally. But what happens is that your adversary has graduated to a steel bullet now. So this steel bullet can easily penetrate the bulletproof jackets what you have in the forces today. So now you have to go back again to the drawing board, and you have to uh, start procuring a bulletproof jacket which can stop a steel bullet.
This
So
is
if it
this
took
is a
you
very
3 years,
interesting. This is exactly where I would like to come going forward. Is that where you have given a very it's a very sad example, but also very interesting example where you just had your bulletproof jackets, but they are archaic. They they are not saving you. So we will get back to this area where this whole Make in India, how it is contributing. It's saving economy and other things is one thing, but how it is contributing to the critical needs of the forces. So that takes me to the second question, sir. India's total defense production was valued at $9 billion in 2023-24. Of the total, one-fifth came from private sector. Do you expect the contribution of private sector to grow? And how it is helping forces to bridge the critical technical or commercial gaps? I mean, suppose you have a jacket which is, say, if you import it, it is costing you, say, 10,000 rupees. And if you can make in India, then it might be costing you 2,000 rupees. Then you can have more jackets. So that is where you have a commercial gap, potential commercial gap. And the question is how private sector is faring to this modernization or the need. Are they supplying you really quality goods? Are they supplying merely assembled products, or are they adding value to the products? Over to you, sir.
Very interesting. I have some figures for you that in 2023-24, the defense exports have been to the tune of 21,083 crores. We have a target of 50,000 crores by 2029. The private sector share to this exports has been 22%, or 16,411 crores. And so you can see, I will divide this this question of yours to be answered in two parts. The first part is that what is the share of the private sector today, and what is the quality which is being given to us by the private sector.
I think private
So,
sector has the largest share in exports, right?
private sector, I'll just 90% approximately of the defense budget is being now earmarked for the domestic sector.
Right.
Only 10% we will import of the defense budget. And out of this 90%, 75% is for the public sector and 25% is for the private sector. Now, if you look at the exports, it is the reverse. You give private sector 25% of the budget, and they give you an export of 75% of your exports. Whereas you give the public sector 75% of the budget, but they only produce your 25% target of export. So here is that issue to be discussed, is that a time has come now to earmark. If you have to reach a 3 trillion production target by 2029, as stated by the Ministry of Defense, then you need to do some take some very hard decisions right now. And the first hard decision is that private sector allocation of the domestic budget has to be increased from 25 to 50%. That is the first prerequisite. And why I'm saying this is, I'll give you a small example of ammunition. Now, ammunition has been a big problem with related to quality, with related to availability for the field army. Now, 80% of our requirement of ammunition used to be met by the ordnance factories, and 20% of our defense requirement was being imported. Now, for the first time, since about you can say 2 to 3 years back, a private sector has come into the manufacture of ammunition. Now, what's happened is we have serious shortage of tank ammunition. We never had that earlier. Maybe a couple of years back, we have serious shortage of artillery ammunition in terms of fuses. 155 ammunition, we had a shortage of fuses, and a one double five shell cannot fire if you don't have a fuse. So, what is the point of having that ammunition with you? So now what has been done is 12 ordnance, these private industries have been identified. One of them is the Adani Defense and Aerospace, the solar industries, and likewise, 12 companies have been identified today in India for producing ammunition. And the second important thing the government has done is it has allowed these 12 companies to have a collaboration with the foreign OEM, original equipment manufacturer. So, what will happen now is the ammunition will be produced in India with the collaboration of these foreign companies. So, now we are not required to buy ammunition from foreign sources. It will be manufactured in India.
So they are
And the
replacing
crunch
the
line,
import. They are replacing the imported ammunition only.
whatever ammunition used to be imported earlier, it is going to be manufactured in India now. We have identified that ammunition.
Right.
For example, mango projectile. I just want to give you an example. It is an armored piercing fin stabilized Sabo projectile, which is used by the T-72 and T-90 tanks. So now this ammunition is going to be manufactured in India because the ordnance factory was not able to produce this ammunition for us for lack of technology, quality of material, etc. So now this ammunition is going to be manufactured by your Economic Explosives Limited in India, and the entire requirement of the Indian Army is going to be met. And mind you, the Ukraine war lessons have taught us that we have to shed the doctrine of the Indian Army 2017. We have a doctrine which tells us short, swift wars. Tomorrow's wars are not going to be short and swift. They're going to be long wars. Right now, we have an ammunition, maybe 15 to 20 days. It will actually last us. And our policy of war wastage reserve ammunition pitches ammunition to at least 40 days requirement holdings. So in case we want to transit from 20 days to 40 days, we need to have an industry which is available in the country to manufacture this ammunition and give it to us, because in times of war, there will be a surge requirement also. We have seen it how Russia is survived this entire war for 2 years, and in spite of all sanctions being imposed on Russia. So it is a lesson learned, because tomorrow you never know, you will also be sanctioned. Because if you don't toe the line of a particular nation, I hope you are getting my message. If you don't
Absolutely.
toe the line of a particular nation, you'll also be sanctioned.
Absolutely.
Then where do you go? Do you go to Russia? You see, so you have to have your own defense ecosystem in the country, and it is high time we start planning for that. We start allocating the budget. And my last point is that in case you want the Indian Army to be a potent force with modern weaponry, modern ammunition, PGMs, laser guided bombs, and all those works, if you want to have in sufficient quantity, we have them, but in very limited quantity. So if you want to have them in sufficient quantity, then you need to increase the defense budget from 1.9% of the GDP to at least 2.2% of the GDP. Because I'm not asking for the moon to be given to the armed forces, because I know they are competing requirements. Your agriculture will also need, your infrastructure will also need, your healthcare will also need. So I'm just saying that from 1.9, let's gradually move to 2.2, and let's also focus on the capital expenditure. Whatever we want today, we require uh, 42 squadrons of the Air Force, and we have 31 squadrons. We have a deficit of 11
31
squadrons.
squadrons, you are saying this is, I think, including those MiGs and etc., right? You basically have
MiG-21
18,
has been phased
19.
out now.
Huh? Sorry?
MiG-21 has been phased out now, so I'm not counting those squadrons of MiG-21.
Mhm.
So we are left with around only about 11 squadrons. So it will take us about 5 years to reach a figure of 35 squadrons. But 42 is still a very, very long way to go. If we talk about Navy, we have around 120 odd ships here today, gunships and corvettes, everything combined. Our target is to have at least 175 ships, because that is the minimum requirement if you want to be a potent maritime force. Similarly, if you come into the army, uh, we have to upgrade our air defense systems. We have the S-400 air defense systems. Five squadrons are to come from Russia. Three have come, and two are balanced. But then this system cannot stop a hypersonic missile. So
Okay.
if your adversary like China has a hypersonic missile today, how is S-400 going to protect you? So these kind of upgrades in the air defense, and that is why I say technology is important. Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, robotics, machine learning, blockchain. These are some of the technologies which I think must get absorbed into the weaponry of the Indian Army. And unless it gets absorbed, I think that we are not in a position right now to call ourselves extremely modern army.